Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Women Serve 2. Today we have Abi Dorhosti with us. She is a retired U.S. Air Force lieutenant colonel and doctoral candidate in transpersonal psychology at Sofia University, where she designed the veteran leadership concentration and will begin teaching later this year. Drawing on 25 years of military service in support of the DoD, Department of State, and the intelligence community, she also brings lived experience of leadership, service, and post-service transition into her scholarly and clinical work. Her doctoral research examines the outside-in pathway, a sequential mixed methods investigation into whether external received compassion facilitates self-compassion access in veterans with moral injury, with an exploratory interest in how states of subconsciousness may facilitate compassionate experience. She is completing her PhD alongside certifications in psychedelic research and ecopsychology, reflecting her commitment to integrating emerging science with transpersonal and relational approaches to healing. Abi's work is grounded in the understanding that moral injury is not only a psychological wound, but a rupture in identity, meaning, and belonging, requiring relational, expert, and often transpersonal pathways to repair. Central to this work is the concept of passionate witnessing, which she explores as both a relational healing mechanism and a subject of scholarly inquiry. She is the founder of a LLC and an invited speaker whose presentation has reached hundreds of veterans, clinicians, and researchers. Her work bridges military experience, merging research, embodied practice, supporting veterans and others healing from trauma, in moving from shame and disconnection towards self-compassion, purpose, and renewed participation in life. And I'm so excited to talk about this because in my Instagram, I've talked about how the VA is working with psychedelics with people with PTSD, and they're currently in the clinical phase. So I'm super excited to talk about this. But Abi, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here and get to have this conversation with you, Brittany. Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to start off with is the person's military experience. Why did you join the Air Force, the best force, and why did you choose the path that you chose? So tell us a little bit about your military experience.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a weird beginning story, I guess. I am a high school dropout with a GED who I sold cars for a few years, starting when I was 18. And I really wanted to go back to college, but I was going for a while to a community college. But then I was selling cars and I had alternating shifts on alternating weeks, and you can't just go to college every other week. And so I had to drop out of community college. And somehow I found my way to a brochure about the Air Force Academy and was like, okay, I'm going to go. And I was told that was not very likely because I had a GED and hadn't even graduated high school. But somehow I made it happen. And excuse me, I turned 21 as a freshman, so I went a little later. Fortunately, I did really well in the SATs and ACTs, and I had decent college transcripts, even though I didn't have high school transcripts. And somehow I was accepted. And 4 years at the academy, a little rough. I'd been living on my own for 4.5 years and out of school for 3.5. I kind of moved out on my own when I was 16. And so I show up there and I'm not allowed to even have like a water boiler in my room because I might burn the place down. Two roommates in the same room as me. And it was a little bit of a shock, and I didn't necessarily take it very well. I walked in with a big chip on my shoulder. I'm an adult, I've been living on my own, I know more than you all, and it didn't make me very popular, understandably enough. It was a rough 4 years, but graduated, ended up getting picked to be a spy officer, which had me bawling in my room right after selection. I had thought I had gamed the system by selecting a couple of things you had to separately apply for, including Intel and OSI. But I didn't do the separate applications. I thought that would push me up to my first and second choices. Yeah, that's not how it works. So it just bopped me down. Yeah, and I'm grateful for it now. That supply transitioned to logistics shortly after I joined. Being a logistics officer gave me the opportunity to be anywhere in the world in a way. And then I became a foreign area officer with a specialization in sub-Saharan Africa as well. Went to do grad school at the Naval Postgraduate School, which was just an incredible experience to be paid as an officer to go full-time to school in Monterey, California. Highly recommend. Yeah, and eventually kind of found my groove as an officer. I showed up to my first duty station exactly 1 month before 9/11. So like that was my introduction to the real military. And I ended up working reception of remains in coordination with the Dover Fort Mortuary. That shifted my perspective very early on in my career. And yeah, it just kind of changed the way I thought and showed up and what it meant to me. And I still originally thought I would do 5 years, get out and become a psychologist because my undergrad was in behavioral science at the Air Force Academy. And yeah, and then I abandoned that, and I was so glad I didn't get picked up for behavioral scientist, which had been my first choice, but it turned out that there were very, very few slots for that because all I would have been doing is developing survey instruments, and it's not, I wanted to work with people. And then I completely gave up that whole thing and decided to actually love the diplomacy and foreign policy, foreign relations world, which is what I was able to do as a FAO. And that's where I really like found my groove as an officer and felt like I was able to shine and to have who I was actually make a difference and not just be a cog in the machine that was utterly replaceable. And so, yeah, I had a lot of incredible experiences, a lot of incredible people, and stayed a little over 20 years. The 25 includes the Air Force Academy, which I mean, wore a uniform every day, carried an active duty ID card, so I count it. But I would have gotten out like right after COVID, and got one of those phone calls to this weird job and decided to take it because I was able to tell them my terms and have them still say they wanted me. And so ended up doing a little more than 20. Yeah. And I'll pause there in case there's questions about the military part before going into the transition and post-military part.
Yeah, because I think 9/11 was such a huge transition for a lot of people that I've talked about in this era. Like 9/11 was the shift, right? Like we had the Gulf War, we had Desert Storm, we had stuff like that. But when 9/11 happened, it was a completely transitional thing. Like it was 20-year war in Afghanistan. So, like, it was very detrimental even to the people who are serving now because Afghanistan was a part of technically their life, right? Even if they weren't born during September 11th. So, tell us how 9/11 transitioned everything for you.
Wow. Now I'm trying to dig back in the memory archives. And full disclosure, I do have a traumatic brain injury, which causes memory issues. And so I sometimes struggle with what happened as opposed to like how it made me feel. But yeah, I think things mattered more because I originally joined mainly for the free education and because I wanted to be a fighter pilot for all the wrong reasons. Basically, so I could walk into a bar, have somebody say, "What do you do?" And I could be like, "I'm a fighter pilot." It's not really.
That's fair. That's like honestly the question that anyone like if you say you're Air Force, they're like, what plane do you fly?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah, and that's not a good enough reason. And I was blessed with actually getting to do some incentive rides in an F-16, which was amazing and incredibly exhausting, incredibly hard on the body. It's something where, and then I worked to make private pilot's license for a little while. And again, it's just every flight, I'd just be utterly exhausted. And it's not what I was meant to do. And I'm grateful, even though it wasn't my choice, I was medically disqualified for endometriosis because old man medicine. And supposedly back in the 60s, there was someone who had a piece of endometriotic tissue that like migrated to their lung. And really, it's bullshit. And it's not disqualifying anymore. That there was a doctor at the Air Force Academy who was a bit of a misogynist asshole, pardon me. A friend of mine actually ended up getting him fired because they were able to show this pattern of him actively trying to push women out. Yeah. So 9/11. Yeah. Showed up at Dover Air Force Base. I was in charge of 13 airmen, had an awesome master sergeant that was my guy, had a staff sergeant that hated me right from the start because I sent out this like, "Hi, I'm your new lieutenant" email that said I was a high school dropout with a GED. He came walking into my office. He's like, "You can't tell people that, man. They won't respect you." I'm like, "Why?" To me, it's the whole point is it doesn't matter where you come from or what you've done. Like, you make what you want happen. Like, to me, this is a success story. I mean, I have a degree now. So apparently it worked out and he just decided he couldn't stand me. And yeah. And that was a really interesting, say, first 48 hours. He thought he was supposed to be a master sergeant because he had a lot of years in, but because of his weight, he wasn't able to promote and, you know, legitimate reasons for all of that. And yet you're a staff sergeant. And I get that you think you should have more authority than that, but you don't. And he basically told me he didn't care what I said. He and his troops were going to build bags until all the bags that were needed had been built. And they were going to work 24/7 around the clock. And I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. you can work 12s and we'll have 2 shifts and we can work around the clock if you like. But no, people aren't going to work more than 12 hours. And he basically told me to pound sand. So that was my first like leadership crisis. And I literally had to go to the first sergeant and get the first sergeant to like tell him, like, no, you actually have to do what the LT says. And like, we're not going to work people for 24 hours. And yes, this is an emergency and it's going to require the long haul. I got in trouble also because we were collecting donations for the Twin Towers. Basically, we'd gotten this list of supplies that they needed, things like duct tape and black Sharpies and boots and such. And so I started calling around to all the local businesses saying like, hey, this is, Lieutenant Abi Dorhosti calling from Dover Air Force Base. We're collecting this stuff. Are you willing to donate something? We're going to have a truck head up to the Twin Towers. And I turned out I'm not allowed to solicit from business using my rank. And, oops. But I had an awesome commander at the time, Tony Martisano, and he pulled me into his office. He says, you did the wrong thing, but you did the right thing. And I would rather have to pull you back than kick you in the ass to get you moving. And he's like, so I'm admonishing you, don't do it again. And good job. So yeah. And my first really weird experience was I was also in charge of the armory because I was in supply and we had the armory and that was part of my flight, war readiness and mobility flight at the time. And so they had me armed. Me and my master sergeant had to be armed so that we could respond to the armory at any time. And so I'm walking around like normal life armed, not at the range for the first time in my life. And they told me I needed to take a couple of bags of go bags to the wing commander's office so he could check his sizes and try them on. So, and this was still desert cami style. And so I show up at the wing commander's office and I'm like, they're trusting me around the wing commander and I have a loaded 9mm on my hip and I can shoot him right now. And this is so weird. And I remember just going through my head, like I could shoot the wing commander. They trust me with this. And that was kind of like my first weirdo experience. And I ended up volunteering as part of the critical incident stress management team because my undergrad was in psychology. And so I would basically show up to the port mortuary to keep an eye on the young airmen who were seeing dead bodies for the first time. I was also seeing dead bodies for my first time. And that was a really powerful, formative part of my military career and going through all my own processes with it and being the person that the young airmen could come and talk to if they needed to, but not feeling like I had someone I could talk to. And looking back, I would say I definitely experienced some PTSD coming out of that time period and fortunately was able to ultimately process it and come through it in a healthy way. But yeah, it was extremely affecting and more than the bodies really was personal effects. That's the part that always impacted me the most. And there would be a white sheet spread out for each person and all of their personal effects would be laid on that. So like the little Nokia cell phone was the same kind that I had. And, the wallet and every item in the wallet would be laid out, the photos of the kids and the spouse. And yeah. And so you're seeing this person's life. And I, made the mistake a couple of times of like looking up the person. Who are they? What can I find about them? And learning not to do that. And then I ended up being the person who would kind of give the general that would fly in to greet the remains a tour of the mortuary. And that's something as General Shelley Kashvili at the time that I really respect that he did is he wanted all of his 1 and 2 stars to go down to the mortuary and be one of the people that saluted the remains when they came in and to literally see the cost of the decisions that were being made. And because this was new, right? We hadn't been in conflict with losing American lives in a while at that point. And so I think that was a really wise choice. And I'm really, really grateful for my time. Then I ended up getting pulled over to be the chief of protocol. And so I was the one out there with the wing commander or vice wing commander, meeting every plane that landed. I was working sometimes 17-hour days. I had 4 days off in the first 4 months. This was right after we actually went into Iraq and timeline. So I think it was maybe a year and a half into my time at Dover, maybe 2 years that I got pulled over into that job. Yeah, year and a half in. And incredible responsibility and incredibly difficult. And I'm so grateful for it. And so I'm like, planning the changes of command and all the normal protocol things, and also working reception of remains with the port mortuary, because that was the highest protocol level thing that happens at Dover. And such an incredible team at the mortuary. And I basically got pulled over because of being the CISM person for a while and having given a few tours of the port mortuary. Here's the humans that we have laid out here right now. Here's the team that does the forensics. Here's why we do the forensics so that they can, look at how could they design a better cockpit where it's more survivable, that sort of thing. Yeah. That was 9/11 for me.
That's a lot to unpack because I don't think people realize like the impact of seeing someone else, like your brothers and sister in arms laid out and you see their life and you're trying to comprehend it and you're trying to maintain military bearing and you're trying to do all of these things. I know like with my husband, his first deployment was to Afghanistan and even to this day, he barely talks about it unless he's drinking. And it was talking about the dead bodies that he has seen
Mhm.
and pulling the dead bodies out of the tents and the effects all of that does to a person. Like, I don't think sometimes the civilian side understands the trauma that it brings because that's not a normal response. Like, a normal person doesn't just see dead bodies upon bodies and bodies. And then as humans, we're curious. We're gonna look up. We're gonna see like their lives and whatnot. And early when I was doing your intro, I was talking about Intel. I was an Intel analyst. So we understood that person that we were targeting inside and out. We knew their family members. We knew what they did, their routine, their kids. And I think that's why a lot of intel people do struggle is because they humanize the terrorist or the person that we're targeting. And that's why they become conscientious objectors or
Mhm.
develop PTSD. And I know you said that you did work with intelligence. Is that what you kind of led into like later in your career? Or how did you get into the intel community?
No, and I wasn't part of the Intel community. I was in support of the Intel community. And what you're speaking to, and I think this is something that's actually really important to me, and this is where my research goes into. A lot of that doesn't lead to PTSD, and it's being misdiagnosed as PTSD. PTSD is a fear based response. It's when you have difficulty driving and not being worried about a roadside bomb going off, even though you're back in the United States. It's this fear response with fireworks going off and that sort of thing. Moral injury is internally directed. It's, I should have done something different, or I did something wrong. Like, how many people during the fog of war have had to shoot a kid or women? And what they did may have been right in the context, or it may have been a mistake. It doesn't matter. There's the moral injury that comes from having done something that's against what you believe is right. What you're talking about with Intel. Like, you look at, and many may disagree with me, but a lot of terrorists in Afghanistan were trying to do what they thought was right. They were trying to defend their country against who they saw as an invader. Terrorism is always wrong. And sometimes people were literally just trying to keep the Taliban from killing their family and didn't really have a choice. And so when you're, as a targeter, selecting are then killed, there can absolutely be a moral quandary with that. And that doesn't lead to PTSD, like fear that something's going to happen. It leads to this internally directed shame and self-recrimination. And could I have done something wrong? Should I have done something different? And it also comes from betrayal. And when an institution that we believe in, and I absolutely still believe in what America stands for. I don't always agree with how America chooses to execute it, right? And there's so many layers down to that. But you find this with military sexual trauma, with rape. Somebody that was in a position of power that you trusted did something wrong or covered something up. And you find this sometimes when all of a sudden you see a decision that military made. I think of stories in Afghanistan of where, okay, yeah, we know this village chief is raping children. Don't do anything. Don't touch them because we need the relationship. Those are the sort of things that lead to these inner crises. And to me, that's what's causing the epidemic of suicide. People aren't committing suicide because they're scared. They're committing suicide because they feel so disconnected from love, from relationship. They feel unworthy to continue to be. They don't see a way to live. And so that's why I think it's so important. And the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual of Mental Health, the DSM, has finally acknowledged moral injury. It's not a diagnosable condition. It's what they call a Z code, essentially, or a B code. Decoding, and you're looking at, or I won't get into the super clinical stuff, but basically it can be added on as context to a diagnosed condition. The same with complex PTSD. Our medical model wants to look at PTSD as something happened, and if we can work with that thing that happened, we can heal from PTSD. But sometimes it's not a thing. Sometimes it's compounding multiple things that started really, most of it starts in childhood, not even during one's military service. And yeah, and you're not going to fix it with a medicine. the drug. And you're not always going to fix it just in conversation with a therapist, although I'm a huge fan of therapy. Like, please, everyone, at least get regular mental health checkups. But it's really healed in relationship. And that's kind of what my research goes into is for some veterans, and it's not exclusive to veterans either, right? Think first responders, think normal humans that have something catastrophic happen to them, or even normal humans that grow up in really difficult conditions. Life can lead to moral distress, and moral distress can become moral injury, or something can be so traumatic that it's a moral injury right there. But the idea of a moral injury is how someone responds to it. It's not the thing that happened. And a lot of it, like sometimes veterans are so feeling unworthy that they don't even have access to compassion for themselves. And self compassion is actually one of the most protective ways of being to not actually develop moral injury. And when I say moral injury, it means that it's actually preventing you from living like your full normal life. Whereas like moral distress is this really sucks and it's hard. Moral injury is I'm not functioning. And how do you heal that if you don't even feel like you're worthy of feeling or deserving of that? And so that's really what I'm looking at is how can being in community, how can talking about the thing that you're most ashamed of with peers that kind of get it and they still love you, it can start to open up capacity to think, okay, maybe I am still worthy of love. Same with psychedelics. And so grateful that the VA is doing some research in this. And there's so many of us that have not waited on the VA. And, psychedelics absolutely changed my life. And my first experience of actual self-love, of I am worthy of love. I actually love myself. And therefore I have the capacity to love everyone. And I can see that everyone is worthy of this was during my first really intense psychedelic experience at a women veterans retreat in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And then I've also worked with Abion in Tijuana with Ibogaine, not for the same reasons as a lot of people work with Ibogaine. It's an incredible medicine for releasing addiction. So if someone is alcoholic, etc., or fallen into harder substances as well, which can happen when you hate yourself, then Ibogaine can kind of reset all the pathways. It literally can release opioid addictions. So heroin addicts are able to not be heroin addicts anymore. Alcoholics are able to not be an alcoholic anymore because you no longer have any desire for alcohol. And for me, it was because there's incredible neuroregenerative properties with Ibogaine. And with my traumatic brain injury, I wanted to see if I could improve my memory and open up these windows of neuroplasticity where new habits can be formed, new ways of being. And it's just such incredible potentials, and the research that's been done is extraordinary, particularly out of Stanford and the research. There's been 3 amazing papers that have come out of a particular cohort of special operations veterans worked with Ibogaine down at Ambio. And the healing is available, and psychedelics are not a magic pill. It's the preparation and the integration afterward that are so important. So you take the epiphanies, if you will, like my moment of self-love, and I could have let that just be, oh, that was a cool memory. That one time when I felt like everything was love. Or you do the work to start to integrate that into your way of being. And that's what I chose to do. And so it's this idea of, and it's not like I'm perfect, right? I don't run around singing Kumbaya all the time. I definitely have my moments of frustration and anger and all of that. But I allow space for that now. I allow myself to feel what I feel. I don't shame myself for it. And I'm able to come back to center so much more easily and just kind of go, part of me is really fucking pissed off right now. Okay, let's feel it. And I can simultaneously remember that, and I'm okay, and it's all okay, and it's all still loved. And so, yeah, anyway, got a little heavy there for a minute.
No, there's like so many follow-up questions I have to that because I guess I was very naive to what is considered as moral injury, right? Like the VA considers everything as PTSD. And I know a lot of people associate military sexual trauma with moral injury. So that's kind of also what I did was associate moral injury with military sexual trauma. So what you're saying is PTSD is something like a remembrance, right? And then moral
Fear-based.
injury is, yes. And then moral injury is kind of like you're struggling with what happened. Okay.
It's something happened that was in conflict with your own moral compass, whatever that is for someone. Whatever you believe is wrong, you did that, failed to prevent that, or you were betrayed in a way that was so wrong that you've lost faith in whatever you believed was something that was right, someone, etc.
But with like, say, VA claims, because
Hmm.
that's a very hot topic, right? Like, we're trying to get compensated for what has happened during our military service. How can someone justify moral injury compared to like PTSD? Because
It's not
I
a
know
VA
from,
capable thing because it's not in the
yeah.
DSM except as an additional. The VA does recognize moral injury. They actually have some really good pages on the VA website about moral injury,
Mhm.
but it is not a claimable diagnosable injury. So for now, PTSD is what's being used for insurance purposes, essentially. And that's causing a conflict on, like, particularly in the intelligence community, right? You think of RPA operators and they're told they don't have PTSD or they don't qualify because their life was never actually in danger.
I was the intel analyst for the drones, and
Mhm.
my VA claim, I tried to get an increase, and they were like, well, you weren't physically there. And so they denied me. And now I'm currently in this limbo of trying to figure out how to essentially increase my percentage, if you will. So
Yeah.
yes, continue. Yes, as what you just said, I'm living it right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I can shoot in the side. I'm blanking on his name right now, but there's a guy that's been doing a lot of work specifically in this area. He was an RPA operator, and he's doing a lot of advocacy on behalf of folks like himself and you. I'd say the best thing to do is look at what are the symptoms, what are the other pieces, right? So anxiety, depression, sleeplessness, and being able to show that those are all service connected.
Mm.
And, I that's one of the reasons why I am an advocate that moral injury become diagnosable in the DSM. There are others that don't want yet another. I actually advocated that we change PTSD to PTSE for externally directed and PTSI for internally directed. That way they can
Mm.
kind of keep it the same, but look at the differentiator. And the internally directed doesn't have to be that your life was in danger because it's not about I might die. It's about I did or I didn't do or I was betrayed. But the thing is, it's real. And this is really, to me, why the majority of people committing suicide, it's not because they're afraid. PTSD, I think, can also become moral injury. If somebody comes home with severe PTSD and they're punching their wife in the middle of the night because she bumped them and they woke up, from a nightmare and they're screaming at their kids and they feel like they can't show up as a partner, as a parent, like that could become moral injury now because all of a sudden you can't be who you feel like you need to be.
So, because PTSD is the broad umbrella term right now, like,
Mhm.
why do you feel that many veterans are trying to treat the wrong wound? And how can we fix that?
I mean, it's the wound that's known. And part of it is not enough veterans, much less clinicians, understand moral injury. And so that's why we're, I think, often trying to treat the wrong wound. And the problem is there are some very effective treatments for PTSD that are potentially even contraindicated for moral injury, like exposure therapy. Exposure therapy is great for PTSD. Stop being afraid of loud explosive sounds or something, right? Exposure therapy is not great for moral injury. Like, let's relive the thing that we did that was horrific and that truly it was against what we believe is right. We don't want someone to start thinking, oh, actually, that was okay. It wasn't okay. It's that wasn't okay, and I can still be okay. It's like Brene Brown talks a lot about the difference between shame and guilt. Shame is
Mm.
corrosive and harmful. Guilt, it can be a useful emotion. Like, I screwed up, I did something bad. I'm not going to do that thing again. I'm still a good person. That's how guilt can be healthy. Shame is I am wrong. I'm fundamentally flawed, and there is no getting out of that. And that's what leads people down the path towards self harm, harming others, ultimately, potentially suicide. And so, how do we hold space for, yes, that was wrong. What was done to me was wrong. What happened was wrong. And I did the best that I could in that moment with the information that I had. I can't go back and change that, but I am still a good human and I can choose to live in the world as a good human. I'm still worthy of love. I'm still worthy of healthy relationships, worthy of showing up. Like, that's the piece that exposure therapy isn't going to fix. And that's where, in so many ways, moral injury is a relational wound. My friend Ryan Roberts is also doing incredible research in this area, and he's also looking at how do we heal moral injury in relationship. That's one of the pieces I'm looking at in my dissertation work. If we need something outside ourselves sometimes, because a lot of there's mindfulness practices to help build self-compassion. But if you literally don't have access to it, sometimes it needs to start from outside. It needs to start with your peers. It needs to start from a men's circle or a women's circle or just a veteran circle of being able to like sit with others that have, in your mind, the capacity to kind of understand. And I would argue that's not limited to other veterans or
Right.
even first responders, but sometimes we need to start with that before we can open up space to, okay, yeah, I'm going to go sit with the hippie yogi therapist who's never been in the military. But we might need to start with, I just need my brothers and sisters in arms to be able to sit and listen to me and to tell me that I'm still okay, even when I'm talking about my deepest shame. And psychedelic, whack upside the back of the head sometimes. Like, I just experienced love. This is actually possible.
Yeah, we're definitely going to dive into that. But I do have a question before that because I'm in this whole process of trying to get back into the military as a physical therapist. But because I do have a diagnosis of PTSD and postpartum depression, the Air Force specifically wanted to make sure I wasn't quote insane. So they sent me to a therapist. And I do believe that people should do talk therapy. I do think therapy can work. I I just know with Intel, it's very hard for us to go to therapy because say if we admitted something was wrong and we wanted to talk to someone, we would lose our security clearance, get kicked out of the military. I've known several people who that has happened to. So when I was in, I just dug all that shit deep down and just ran with it. So anyway, I started a therapy session with someone and she didn't have a military background. So for me, it was extremely hard to try to one, connect with her, and two, I didn't feel like she was receptive almost. Like there was a huge disconnect in my
Mhm.
opinion. So for someone who does want to start off with talk therapy, like what should someone kind of look for or what should the process be?
It's a really tough question. It's so very individual.
Right.
For one, like talk therapy isn't necessarily the only form. I like to look for someone that has a broader repertoire of like somatic therapies, looking at Gabor Mate's work, for example. He's had incredible success working with veterans, and it's a very somatic standpoint of looking at how are we storing trauma in the body and how can the way we move, express, help kind of release things. And the other thing is, again, it's hard to start with this sometimes because it's the trust thing, right? But I've been recently finished a 16-week program supporting my friend Ulrike with a program that was funded by the SEAL Futures Foundation. So we're working with 9 Navy SEALs, and it's set up to where there's at least one practitioner per SEAL. And the beauty of her program, which was crazy to me, like she's German. I was the only American military background facilitator in this program. There are, young women from the Netherlands, the UK, Portugal, and older as well. And there are a couple of men, incredible men that were also supporting it. But for the most part, these were folks that have zero connection to the US military, but they showed up to be part of this program. And very quickly, the SEALs were able to drop into like deep trust. And part of it was because we worked in, basically, Ulrike would present a lesson about here's a modality, and it's called the emotional mat. And the idea is that we get on the mat to work physical stuff. We don't ever get to learn how to work with our emotions, and it's so necessary. And so it's called the emotional mat. And I'm hoping she's picked up to do more of these programs because it was incredible. So she'll teach a method of relating. And then we break up one on one and we facilitate each other. So I would facilitate a SEAL and then he would facilitate me in practicing this. And, Ulrike would always do a demo. And quite often she would cry during her demo. So the difference here is that I'm not showing up as I am maintaining the therapeutic distance. And that's the way so much therapy works is I stay neutral. I'm always neutral. I don't believe that works for most veterans. Like we need to see that you feel what we're feeling, that you have this empathy and this capacity to really listen and receive. And that goes contrary to the way most therapists are trained. So it's finding, maybe exploring someone that's willing to not just be neutral, that's willing to like show up and be vulnerable themselves. And I know there are many therapists that are in that space. Yeah. And that's the thing with psychedelic integration therapy and that sort of thing too, is that it requires being in relationship, not just being neutral.
Because I want to dive into the psychedelics because the VA just passed a clinical trial of using psychedelics to help with people with PTSD and drug/alcohol related conditions. So when I posted that, someone who I used to work with in the incel community said that he was already using psychedelics and it has tremendously helped him with his PTSD. So, kind of explain what the whole purpose is, how it works, and why it's so important to try to integrate this.
Oh, there's a lot of layers to this. There's the biological neuroplasticity effect. Essentially, we go through life doing things a certain way and believing things are a certain way, and that creates what you think of as grooves in the brain, our default patterns. Psychedelics open up this period, this window of neuroplasticity. Robin Carhart Harris has done a lot of research around this that allows the brain to connect in new different ways, that gives us a chance to kind of release those grooves and build new ones. So that's the whole integration piece. That's one of the reasons it helps break addiction, is addiction's a pattern and it can release it. There's also the more spiritual, emotional part of it. And I'm a little bit woo woo, and most people that have worked with psychedelics end up a little bit woo woo, even if they weren't that way to start. It's you have these experiences that are so hard to explain. And for some people, it's literally connection to God, the universe, nature, Gaia, however somebody describes something that is so much greater than we are. So they say that one of the most important emotions for being human is awe. Like those moments with a sunset or looking at the Grand Canyon or whatever it is. But when we feel connected to something so much greater, and that's where psychedelics can kind of create this profound sense of awe. And I do want to put in the caveat, I am not a proponent of psychedelics for everyone. It's not meant for everyone. However, for those who are open to it, it's an incredible medicine. And I would say truly a medicine beyond, like I would call what the pharmacists are giving us a lot of the time drugs. You know, keep taking this for the rest of your life or keep taking this for a significant period of time. Whereas psychedelics, it's okay, have this profound experience and then you're good for 6 months to a year. And then maybe you want to try again to see if there's another layer that's available to be released or opened up to. But it's not like something that you have to take all the time. That's why I'm also personally not a huge fan of ketamine. It's like ketamine is one of those ones where you tend to have to keep going back. And likewise, MDMA, like those are the two that they're looking at the most. MDMA actually has some negative side effects with toxicity to the brain, which is not to say, like, I think it can be an incredible medicine to work with on an occasional basis for connection. It's really powerful for couples in particular because it helps drop the defensiveness. And so you can hear hard things and receive them with love so that you can move past them. And I know quite a few couples that might have like a small MDMA journey once a month or once a quarter, just to really be able to put everything on the table with their hearts open with love and move through and process that. So it's an incredible therapeutic tool in that sense. But there's so many others. You know, psilocybin is an incredible medicine and it can be used for microdosing. I microdose psilocybin myself at times, or a powerful journey that just opens you up. And the research is showing you can have this one profound experience, or maybe you have 3 ceremonies during a retreat. I'm a huge fan of retreats, like step back into a different space, give your body, your mind, your spirit a chance to kind of step away into a liminal space. And then choose how you want to come back out of that, as opposed to like, okay, I'm going to go in my living room and go on a journey, and then I'm going to be right back in the same thing and the same pressures. So that's less opportunity to choose how you want to shift. Can also work, just requires a lot of deep intention. And then like ayahuasca, ibogaine, 5-MeO DMT, like these are just incredibly powerful medicinal allies that open up space for connection to something greater, for deeper connection with all the parts that we are, and biologically to help with rewiring the way our beliefs are patterned, the way our habits are patterned. And so looking at it from all of those standpoints, it's a beautiful thing that so many more people are looking at these possibilities with intention. Not, oh, I'm going to go get high, or I'm going to go have a cool experience at the club. And, you know, nothing against that. Not my thing. I'm not going to judge somebody that wants to, you know, take some mushrooms and go have a great ecstatic dance. You know, cool, go do you. You're not hurting anybody. To me, that's way healthier than getting drunk on alcohol, you know? alcohol tends to be a heart closer and it's a depressant. And so that's why I'm not a fan of alcohol. I'll have the occasional glass of wine. I don't not drink, but I drink so rarely these days because it's just like, I want to be fully present. I want to be fully aware. I want to show up. I don't want to numb anymore. And then there's these other medicines where it's a very intentional thing of I am here to learn a little bit more about myself, to connect more deeply, to show up, to hear whatever messages are meant for me so that I can then step out of that experience with maybe different choices ahead of me.
So you mentioned that you don't think that this is for everyone. So who do you think it is meant for? And explain the differences between each of the ones that you mentioned. Because I know the VA is working with more of like,
DMA.
yeah, that's the word. That's what I was going for. Compared to other ones. Like I know Aaron Rodgers, despite being a Packers quarterback and I'm a Bears fan, I do not like him, but he did go on that retreat and experimented with other drugs. So kind of explain also the differences between each of them and why someone would choose one over the other.
Sure. And I don't want to claim extreme expertise in this. Yes, it's an area of research and study, but there's only one that I personally more work with. That's kind of my medicine, although I have experience with a few. Let me start with when I say it's not for everyone, if someone feels like a strong no, like I really believe in listening to our intuition. The problem is we don't even know how to do that a lot of time when we get out of the military because for so long we've lived from the neck up. It's only the logical things. So learning how to actually listen to your heart, listen to your gut, like that takes intention and practice to be able to pause and slow down and actually listen. So yeah, it just comes to there are individuals who have zero desire to ever work with a substance. That's okay. There are certain psychological conditions that are potentially not conducive, but there's a lot of research happening in those areas too. So schizophrenia, for example. And it doesn't mean that someone who's schizophrenic could never work with medicines, but there's a much higher risk around it. So if they were, they're probably going to want to work with people that have a high level of facility at holding space for all of that. And that's where, again, ideally, excuse me, if anyone has mental health conditions that are potentially contraindicated, they're working with someone that has like real experience and expertise in this. And I would always say to anyone, like, don't go to your cousin's dealer, if you're wanting to work with intention for healing purposes, like seek out more reliable sources. And sometimes that is in the underground. There are incredible humans that have been facilitating underground for many, many years because that's what was available. But try to track your way to someone you trust. Like I've been that for people where someone who knows me refers a friend to me. And so now there's a little bit of initial trust and then we have the conversation. And, I always tell anyone, like, really just listen to your gut. Who are you drawn to? Same with a therapist. Like, who are you like, okay, actually, I'm curious about this person. Like, following your curiosity, following where you feel drawn, I think is one of the most important things here. And then when it comes to the different medicines, you'll hear people say, like, if you're meant to work with Aya, she'll call you, which for somebody that comes from a very logical military world sounds like, the fuck does that mean, right? To me, it's this like allowing the curiosity to be there. Follow the curiosity. And if you're like, oh, wow, this really feels like something like I want to know more, I want to experience this, then keep exploring and be open to that. And then there's so much research out there available, both clinical scientific literature and also people just have written about their experiences. And so you can go down all the internet rabbit holes and like find the thing that this really resonates for specific medicines. And I want to say, I'm not personally a huge fan of ketamine. That doesn't mean that it's not absolutely the right answer for so many people. And many people have had incredible breakthroughs and experiences. And there's some wonderful research around ketamine. I'm just giving my personal thing here. And I'll admit, I've never worked with it, partly because my intuition says no. Like, that's not my medicine. My very first veterans retreat, we had a group psilocybin ceremony first. I didn't get much out of it. Other people had life-changing experiences. I saw some like cool patterns when I'd close my eyes and I'd open them and, you're wobbly, like I had to be helped to the bathroom kind of thing. And I told our shaman, Oscar, who's amazing. He was the shaman that was in the 60 Minutes documentary as well. Love Oscar. Amazing, amazing, beautiful man. And I'm like, I don't know. It's just weird. Can I have more? And he's like, just close your eyes. It's okay. In a little while, you can have more, maybe. And I never did end up getting more. And I remember just being like, well, that was weird. And other people are like in their own world. And I'm like, I kind of want to have the experience they're having. And honestly, looking back, I was still too much in control. Like I wasn't willing to surrender. And what was funny is it lasted a really long time for me. I just had, I think it was a 3.5 gram dose in orange juice. And like 10 o'clock that night, and we started like 9 or 10 in the morning, I think. Like I look at things and there's like a little waviness and some patterns to the floor, the wall, but I wasn't tripping. It was more just like, okay, when I look around, things are a little weird, but other than that, it's relatively normal. But other people, like, they were completely through. And so I felt like it had a delayed, long, slow effect on me instead of that like intense whatever. And then the next morning, I was one of the first group across 2 days to work with 5-MeO DMT. And I didn't know I could ask for more. And so I inhaled, I think I coughed, I fell back. The world grayed out for a second. And then I was back and I just laid there for like 20 minutes, like, so psilocybin wasn't my medicine, and maybe this isn't my medicine either. And okay, am I going to find my medicine? Am I going to ever have this experience? Like, and it was supposed to be like, that was it, right? We had our psilocybin ceremony and then we had our 5-MeO ceremony. I'm just like, and I thought I was supposed to meet God and stuff and nothing's happening. And, there's something wrong with me. And I just laid there for 20 minutes and Oscar put his hand on my arm after a little while. He's like, how are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. Nothing really happened. It grayed out for a second. And then I've just been laying here. And he's like, oh, okay. So are you sure? Like I think he was trying to figure out if I just didn't remember and had just come back or what was going on. Anyway, we went to our little integration circle that evening and we sat down and one of the women was like, wow, it took my third try before I actually had my journey. But oh my God, that was incredible. I was like, I could have tried again. Well, shit. Okay, I guess it's too late now. And so I was just feeling really defeated, honestly. Sorry, 1 second. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah. For Abby. Yes, thank you. I just had a delivery arrive. Sorry. And I just like go on this retreat. And at that point I had paid for the retreat and paid for the flights down to Puerto Vallarta. And I'm like, and that's it. And then Oscar came to me the next day and to me and one other woman who we just hadn't really had an experience yet and said, do you want to try a different medicine? And we said, yeah. And so we worked with Changa, which is essentially pure DMT, NN-DMT, which is different from 5-MeO DMT. And with that one, I had like really cool visuals, but it's like a 30-second trip. And I came back and I told Oscar, it's really cool visuals, but I don't know, I don't feel any different. And he said, so you may have just witnessed the birth of the universe and you're worried about what you didn't get. I don't necessarily recommend this as a technique, but funny enough, like it was actually what I needed to hear in that moment, even though that wouldn't have been the right thing necessarily to say to anyone else. So I'm just trusting Oscar. I do believe a lot of the time we say shit that doesn't even make sense to us, but it's what the other person needed to hear. It's just channeling. And I was like, yeah, I just need to be in gratitude. And I think that was the point at which like, I was like, well, with the psilocybin, I thought I was trying too hard to like have a particular intention. And then with the 5-MeO, I still had like all this expectation of what's going to happen. And then with the Changa, it's like, okay, finally, like I just need to be in gratitude and just let go of it all. And then he came up to me that night and he said, I know that he said, have you gotten what you need? And I said, to be honest, I don't really feel like I have. And he said, I want you to leave feeling like you got what you needed. Do you want to try 5-MeO DMT one more time? And I said, yes. He said, okay, tomorrow when we get back, I'll check with you again. I said, okay. And so I actually stayed back. That day, everyone else went on this like village visit, but I had an online meeting that I was actually really excited about. I had a beautiful day. It's this gorgeous like mansion on the cliffside over the ocean. I went and did a Qigong practice on the rocks out in the ocean and really like the medicine had actually had an effect on me. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was just like, it was more in joy and colors were brighter and life just felt really beautiful. And they were setting up for dinner and everybody came back. I was like, oh, sweet, I can eat. And right when I was getting ready to get up and jump on the buffet, Oscar sits down next to me. I was like, shit. And if I'd eaten, I wouldn't have been able because you have to fast for a few hours beforehand. And he said, do you want to try again? And I said, yes. And it was funny because the first time I forgot when he'd come and asked me the day before, he asked if I wanted to try again. And I said, I came here to say yes. So the answer is yes. He said, or so if you think I should, then yes. And he said, no, this is not my decision. This is your decision. You choose if this is right for you. And that's when I was like, okay, yes, it's right. And he came back and I went and got my dear friend, Ivy Losi. She's who had originally invited me down to the retreat. And I asked if she would hold space for me. And she said yes. And so her and Oscar and I went down and I smoked the medicine again. And I had the most profound life-changing experience. And 5-MeO DMT is my medicine. That's the medicine that I work with. I've done 3 trainings for facilitation, and I don't market this or advertise it or do it a lot. And right now I'm actually not facilitating for a period of time while I finish my PhD. And that I will probably come back to facilitating again, but I don't know. I'm really just kind of trusting the flow of what happens with that. But yeah, I don't actually know what happened during the journey. I had a complete blackout. I screamed. Like I basically witnessed myself kind of drifting off, and I witnessed that I had rolled over on my side and began screaming. I was like, screaming. There's no meaning, there's no emotion attached to it. And then fade to black. And when I came back, I knew that the screaming had been releasing or purging something, and I didn't know what it was, and I didn't need to know. I was okay not knowing. And I just woke up with this, or came out with this sense of just profound love for myself, for the earth, for everyone. And it's hard to describe that kind of experience because it's just so profoundly overwhelming. But it was just, I came back with this knowledge that it's all love. And it's like, how is my love expressing in this moment? Sometimes love expresses as anger. Sometimes love expresses as fear. Sometimes love expresses as what we think is hate. And sometimes love expresses as love and joy and laughter and awe and delight. And it's all love, ultimately. And I can never forget that I know that this is true. Even when I'm having all like I'm still freaking human, like frustration and irritation and all the shit of life, I can never forget that I know, capital K know, capital G gnosis, that this is true. So it's so much easier to just kind of come back. Not always immediately, but it's there. It's like that anchor is there. And 5-MeO is a really, really, really powerful medicine. And it's also, in some ways, a really accessible medicine because a journey generally lasts like 20 minutes. You could drive home afterwards, although I don't recommend just, driving home necessarily, more from an emotional, giving yourself time to process standpoint. And there's a lot of research being done around 5-MeO for these reasons as well. Yeah. And then I had this period of neuroplasticity during which I could just be in my curiosity of how do I want to shape my mornings, shape my evenings, shape my beliefs. It's like a great time to practice affirmations and remind ourselves, I am love, I am worthy of love, I am wise, I am whatever. The attributes we want to kind of really anchor into our consciousness so that we can act in that way, be in that way from a place of humility too. Not I am, therefore I'm above anyone else, but I am and so are you. And so we can just like be in this expanded capacity for compassion for each other as well. Yeah. So that changed my life. And then I retired. I actually, sue me, whatever. I wasn't actually retired when this happened, but it was past my final out. And so I gave myself permission, even though I was technically still active duty, to go and have this experience. And then when I actually retired, I completed a certificate at Georgetown University in health and wellness coaching, because that was my original plan, was to go into coaching. I moved to Costa Rica. And after I got there, a friend of mine who I'd met at a previous retreat that had no medicine or psychedelics associated with it, but she was holding an ayahuasca retreat called Tantra-huasca. And she combines Tantra, women only, and ayahuasca. And Tantra really being this using our feminine energy as a way and access to creativity, to self-love, etc. And I had 3 ayahuasca ceremonies during that retreat. And again, profound, life-changing. Ayahuasca is medicine that you want to have a lot more intention around. She's described as a very feminine medicine, very ancestral, very earth-based. You're generally going to have a dieta, they call it, beforehand. Spanish for diet, just meaning that you cut out generally salts and oils and meats and go to a very like clean, simple, mostly vegetarian diet before you work with the medicine. And there are some of these that are actually contraindicated with the medicine itself, and others are more of a this idea of purifying the body, purifying the mind, and going into it with deep intention. And my first journey, there was a lot of darkness, like images of pain and car crashes and death and destruction. And it's kind of like, what the fuck is this? And when I came out of it, and it wasn't like I wouldn't say there was fear during that. It was more just like, what am I witnessing? And I came out with this recognition that I carry darkness, and that's okay. Like coming out of the military, of course I carry some darkness, right? The things that we have to deal with and see and hear about and know of, there's a lot of darkness there. And we all carry some darkness, and we all carry so much light. And so it was really this lesson of being able to accept that I carry darkness, and that that's okay, and that it doesn't mean I am dark, and that it's not going to all be processed and released like in an instant or in a journey, that's the work of a lifetime, and that it's okay. And then my second journey was crazy. And I really feel like I channeled and released a lot of the energy of warfare in a way that was quite frankly terrifying during parts of it, but also felt necessary. I also felt like I was channeling a lot of ancestral energies. Like I was singing Native American stuff and like I wasn't doing any of this necessarily. It was just happening. And then the third one, I remember I asked, like set my intentions and said my prayers. Like I've had this prayer I've said since I was a child that's basically asking to be a channel and a vessel. And this one, I was like, I'm willing to be a channel and a vessel if it's really needed, but can this ceremony please just be for me? Can it be light? Can it be fun? And it was. And it was delightful and playful. And it brought me this gift of being able to let go of always being in control. And it was weird at the time. And looking back, I'm amazed there was no fear whatsoever, but I essentially couldn't control my body for about 18 hours. I started doing all this like weird stuff. And I'm just like, what's happening? And I couldn't control it. And then when I would lay on my side, I would sometimes relax so much my jaw would drop and my lips would droop. And I realized I'd never relaxed my lips before in my life. Even in sleep, my face looks normal because everything's held normal. And all of a sudden, everything was just no control. And it was funny because the ceremony eventually ended and we all held hands and there's a song that we sing at the end. And I was kind of on my knees holding people's hands and doing this because I actually couldn't hold still. And then it was time for dinner and I couldn't feed myself. So someone else actually spoon fed me because everything was just going crazy. And I was just laughing. And I wasn't afraid and I wasn't worried about it. I was just like, okay, weird. Fortunately, I did hold still while I slept because we were in bunk beds and the person on the top bunk probably wouldn't have appreciated it if I was thrashing all night. But I did sleep. And when I got up the next morning, okay, it hasn't stopped yet, hopefully soon. And it didn't stop until there was this ceremony that we did where we paired up later that day. And with what we were doing, you actually needed fine motor control. And I realized halfway through that all of a sudden I was in full control of my body again. It's like, okay, good. And then we went to the beach later on that day and I was in the water. I was like, I wonder if I can drop back into that. And I was able to drop right back into it. I was like, whoa, this is so cool. So now I can choose when to just like let my body move the way it wants to, which is great. Like ecstatic dance is a practice of mine. A lot of people haven't heard of it, but basically it's silent, sober, and barefoot. And you just go and let your body move the way it wants. And people are rolling around on the floor and spinning and doing whatever. And I love being able to go and just let my body move the way it wants to move. And in meditation, a lot of the time now, I let go and my body will do some weird movements and like things will snap, crackle, pop and go back into place because my body actually knows what it needs to realign my spine and joints and everything. And so it felt like such a gift. Yeah. And then I've done a full tab of LSD only once in a group ceremony. And that was weird and interesting and like not something I feel called to do again. It was the closing ceremony for one of my 5 MEO facilitation trainings. Like, okay, that was cool, but because I don't work with medicine to have cool experiences, I do it for actual profound healing and such. I'm like, okay, I don't need to do that again. I might microdose it at some point. And microdose means like you cannot feel it like perceptibly, but it can be a good tool for creativity. Silicon Valley is doing it all the time, sort of thing, right? The same with psilocybin. I microdose where I can't feel anything, but for me, it's more of just the ceremony of just connecting deeper to myself, God, the earth, just this like ritual in the mornings sometimes that also has been shown to have antidepressant effects. And I don't suffer from depression and I'm human and we all can have like a little more joy and a little less joy sometimes. And I choose a little more joy and maybe it helps with that. I couldn't tell you it does for sure or not. I certainly know it's not hurting anything. And I think that's the majority of the medicines that I really have any sense of. Oh, and I worked with MDMA twice, very low dose. And the joke with the group that I was in is that I don't need MDMA because I am MDMA. I tend to be pretty loving and open-hearted anyway. So I don't know if it had any effect or not, but whatever. Like, again, it's not a medicine I feel like I need to work with. I would love to at some point. I'm single. I'm hoping not to spend the rest of my life single. And yeah, I would love to practice with my husband, boyfriend, partner, whatever at some point to actually have a very intentional MDMA journey and ceremony together. So at one point, I will try that as well. So yeah, hopefully that answers your questions about the medicines.
There's just like so many different ones. And you mentioned that you did it while you were still, you finaled out, but you were still technically active duty. So was this the reason why you decided to pursue this certain PhD or what is your dissertation as far as your current doctoral program?
Yeah. So I had zero plans to get a PhD. Definitely had zero plans to ever be a professor or teacher. These are all just things that happened when I stopped trying to control everything and just started seeing what happened with curiosity. And so I did the Georgetown coaching certificate partly because I didn't want to go back to school. But I'd found out with coaching, I can do not the same thing, but in a lot of ways, largely the same thing. I can work with people. And I really wanted to focus on working with veterans healing from trauma. And I'm a huge proponent of coaching when it's a good coach. Unfortunately, the term gets thrown out by a lot of people that don't have any certifications. And there's a lot of, watch this video for 3 hours and we'll give you a coaching certification stuff too. Georgetown's program I thought was excellent. And then I've collected several other coaching certifications since. I'm a psychedelic integration coach. I'm having a mental blank. There's a couple others. Trauma-informed coaching and something else. Yeah, I usually am working either with a therapist or a coach myself, and I'll do like a block of here's something I'm working with. Like most recently, I worked with a wonderful women's embodiment coach, and it was really on coming back to like loving my body as it is, which doesn't mean I don't maybe want to also work out more or be better with my diet or something, but can I love myself as I am and also see a desire to shift something instead of like, I don't like how my body is and that's why I'm dieting or working out or whatever, right? Yeah, and so that was a really wonderful 10 weeks, about 20 weeks that we worked together. And I'm on a break at the moment because of travel. And I just got to Bali 3 days ago and I'll be here for 3 months. And there's a wonderful psychotherapist that comes from a Buddhist perspective. Her name is Emily Wolf. She's American, but here in Bali. And I worked with her previously and I'm probably going to reach out to her again because I think it's really healthy to have that other person with a different perspective to work with at times. I'm also privileged to be in a position where I can pay for this out of pocket so I can choose who I want to work with and find what feels aligned. Yeah. So big fan of coaching, really grateful for that background. And that was kind of what I was going to do. And I held a couple of women veterans retreats in 2023. I moved to Costa Rica in 2022. That's when I retired. Held those retreats and ended up burning out at the end of that year. I was also the wellness director and coach for a friend's company, and they lost their big government contract and canceled all subcontracts, including me. And so I went from having about 10 clients a month, having steady income. It was great. I was making between $4,000 and $6,000 a month for what felt like nothing compared to the hours we work in the military. What I hadn't realized is that I was actually holding a lot. I never really stopped. And I highly recommend taking an actual sabbatical, like stopping when you get out of the military for anyone that can. And most of us can. We just have to figure out how. I launched my business, launched my nonprofit, and working 1 hour every other week with about 10 clients. And I was holding guided meditation sessions for the company as well once a week. It sounds like not a lot on paper, but there's a lot of energy and emotion that goes into holding space for other humans, right? And because it was new to me, I had more tension around it. I have to get this right. Now I'm able to do that so much more easily because I don't care if I get it right because I know it's going to be right in the moment. And even if it pisses the other person off, I trust my training. I trust what to me is my connection to God, source, universe, whatever name you want to use. I trust my intention in my heart. And I'm okay making mistakes and also hearing from someone that's not what I need. Okay, how can I support you? What do you need? So it's I don't look at it as possible to make a mistake anymore, as opposed to I'm open to correction. I'm open to, all right, we're going to shift what we do. I'm also open to saying, you know what, I don't feel like this is working. I would really like to refer you to someone that has more of a specialization in, X, Y, Z. And so there's just a lot of joy in the non-attachment of it, which is very different from detachment. I love my clients with a capital L, but I'm not their journey is their journey. And it's not my responsibility to fix anyone, which I don't think anyone's broken. I'm just there to hold space. So it's become easy now. But then it felt like on paper I wasn't working very many hours, but I was holding a lot and I kind of burnt out again. And so that's when I decided to come back to Bali, where I first came in 2019. And I was very lucky because my transition was so much easier because I started it in 2019 and I didn't retire till 2022. I don't believe I had a moral injury, but I definitely dealt with moral distress during my assignment at the Department of State. I was working in the Political Military Affairs Bureau. My job was approving arms transfers to the Middle East. I often felt a way about what we were doing and the arms we were selling and who we were selling them to and what was going to happen to them afterwards and what was potentially going to be used against our own people or who they were selling our technology to on the side potentially. And like in some ways, I'm a tree hugging hippie in the sense that I think there's a necessity for armed conflict, but I hate conventional warfare because it's a loss of so much blood and treasure. I was always a fan of special operations, and I was blessed to work with that community for a lot of my career because we can be very surgical and very precise with extremely highly trained people so that we can avoid conventional warfare. And I love diplomacy. Like, yes, please, can we just avoid warfare because we can come to agreements? So, selling a lot of weapons of death, like it was difficult for me. And I was depressed and angry and frustrated. And I worked with amazing people, thank God. So I was still able to be in a good mood when I would go to work every morning. And I was angry and exhausted by the time I left every night. And I was finally able to change to the Counterterrorism Bureau, where I had a role so much more aligned with. I felt like I was doing good. I was working with foreign terrorist fighter repatriation from Syria. And so trying to get kids and families out of refugee camps back to their home country so that maybe these children have a chance of normal lives and not just to also become terrorists. And for the foreign terrorist fighters themselves, let's get them repatriated into their home country and through a legal and justice system. So maybe they can actually come out the other side too. So it created the possibility of hope as opposed to let's just keep them all in a prison where they're potentially going to get broken out of it and continue with terrorist activities, blah, blah, blah. And so that felt good. And in between those jobs, like I knew I was not okay. And I'd finally started seeing a therapist, driving across the river to the Pentagon once a week to sit with Lisa for an hour, which really helped me recognize that it wasn't just cognitive dissonance at work. I had all kinds of shit I'd been bearing for years and years and years, down to childhood stuff, down to conception stuff. And working with her, I was able to start to at least see that all of this stuff was there, shoved down, sometimes tucked in a box with a chain around it in the back of my brain, and to start to open space to look at this. And I wanted a break, and I asked my new boss if she was willing to gap the position for 3 weeks so I could get myself right. And she said yes. And so I flew to Bali, worked with a coach/therapist the last week of my 3 weeks, one-on-one, 5 hours a day for 7 days straight. That was my first life-changing moment. It was the first time I kind of surrendered and reconnected with a higher power. I had described myself as an agnostic humanist for a while before that. And yeah, when I came here is when I kind of went, I can't do this all alone. And I surrendered, and then, that shifted everything. And then working with Valenique, first time with inner child work, first time in an ecstatic dance, going to the Balinese Melakat water cleansing and blessing ceremonies, learn EFT, emotional freedom technique, tapping stuff, which was the first thing she did with me. I'm like, okay, this is stupid. And then I have this rib that likes to pop out of place that causes a lot of back pain a lot of the time that I've been dealing with for years. And she saw me like doing this constant thing. And she's like, what's going on? And I told her, she's like, well, let's tap on it. Huh? And so she led me through this thing and it released. And I was like, what the hell just happened? And so that's when my woo meter started pegging up. And I'm like, okay, some of this stuff I thought was like crazy. Maybe this shit is real. And so I just kind of went, okay, I'm going to just stay curious. I'm going to quit saying that's bullshit. I'm just going to see what happens. And so that week working with her was profoundly life-changing. And I came back to State Department at the time, Counterterrorism Bureau, a different person. And I no longer was, I am a military officer. I am Abi. And yes, this is something that's very important and dear to me. And it is part of who I am, but it is not who I am. And so I was able to start to figure out who am I outside of just the uniform a couple years before I actually retired, which I highly recommend to anyone listening who's still in uniform. Start exploring that before you get out. Makes the transition so much easier.
I love it. So for people who want to connect with you and learn more about your journey and just more questions about psychedelics, because I think people who were kind of closed-minded about it may potentially be a little bit more open-minded now that a huge department is kind of getting involved. So if they have more questions and your journey or just anything about this topic that we discussed, how can people connect with you?
One of the best places is on LinkedIn, Abi Dorhosti. You can just look me up with my name. And I publish a newsletter there called The Alchemy of Wellness. And I've written quite a few articles about PTSD versus moral injury and how to hold conversations around topics like suicide. And yeah, it's just exploring different dimensions of this. And so you can read the articles that I've written on LinkedIn. They are also on my nonprofit website, which is amistarfoundation.org. It's AMISTAR. It's an archaic Spanish word for to befriend. So amistarfoundation.org. And then if you go to articles, they're all published there as well for anyone that's not on LinkedIn. And you're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn or through my website. I'm also at healed/liminal. My company's name is Liminal Experiences. Or you can message me through the Amistar Foundation website as well. And and I'm not holding any retreats right now. I'm not actively looking for more coaching clients. I'm more just like I'm happy to connect people to or help them explore what might be right for them. Do potentially a little bit of coaching. I'm still working with prior clients, but I've mainly made space for my PhD work and to continue to study. Finish that September 2027, and then I start teaching this winter one of the classes for the veteran leadership concentration I developed. The first class is happening this summer, starting Monday, taught by Dr. Roger Brumet on the hero's archetype and how the protector archetypes, the warrior archetypes, how we relate back to that as service members. The concentration is for veterans, not only of the military, but first responders, police officers, and also allies, spouses, and folks working in the nonprofit spaces in support of these types of people. So it's really designed not to turn somebody into a therapist, but to learn how to hold space as a peer, how to create programs to support veterans. And then the course I'll be teaching this winter, I just finished developing, and that got packaged up a couple of weeks ago, is called From Complex Trauma and Moral Injury to Post-Traumatic Growth. And it's really on how we take these wounds, and we all know scar tissue is stronger than regular tissue. It's like a lot of the wounds are what actually turns into our wisdom, how we can change the way we see those wounds, change the energy around them to being sources of wisdom. Mm-hmm. And then there's a 1-credit course that I think we're going to teach it this fall. I think it'll be the following fall, that's on what is the psychedelic landscape, ethics, legality, et cetera, for veterans and first responders, primarily focused on here in the US, but also looking at what is accessible to veterans in Mexico, in Costa Rica, and other spaces, in Canada for that matter. And then there's going to be a course on servant leadership that's really about how do we hold space for really difficult conversations with someone who's attempted suicide or who's lost someone to suicide, or the grief that can come with transition. I call it the grief class, although that's not its official name, but learning how to get away from wanting to fix and just being able to feel like you can show up for those kinds of conversations and even access your own vulnerability. So I want to put a plug in for the Sofia University Veteran Leadership Concentration as well.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, like, as a spouse, as a peer, like, those conversations, they're hard to have, but they're so necessary to have that space. And I love that you're doing that because it's not an easy conversation, but it's easier than having to deal with someone who committed suicide or a situation like that. So I absolutely love that. So if you would like to connect with her, all the links are going to be in the show notes as well. Abby, I know you're in Bali right now and you're living your best life. I've enjoyed this conversation, and please, anyone who has questions about psychedelics or her journey, please reach out. So again, thank you so much for doing the show. But what is one thing that you hope that listeners would take away with this conversation?
You're not broken, and follow your curiosity.